I want to welcome you to the co-naming of South William Street for the Mill Street Synagogue, Seixas Way. This has been a long project. My name is James Kaplan. I'm the president of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association, and we are basically a consortium of various historical and civic groups here in Lower Manhattan. We were formed about 5 years ago when a number of us believed that the very rich history of Lower Manhattan as it related to the Revolutionary War was not fully appreciated. So our purpose is to name things and to create events that will raise the profile of Lower Manhattan as a historical destination for the Revolutionary War, and also educate people who live, work here in Lower Manhattan and throughout the city about the importance of Lower Manhattan and the New York City in the American Revolution. So this project, the marking of the South William Street, Mill Street Synagogue Seixas Way, in essence is a continuation of our efforts to educate people and to advise people of very important events that occurred here in Lower Manhattan, of which they may not be aware. In fact, what I discovered was that there was a very close and very significant role of the Jewish community in here in New York City during the Revolution. And they were very closely, Rabbi Seixas, the Patriot Rabbi, was very closely tied with George Washington. And the Jewish community had a very significant impact on the Patriot cause in the Revolution. And I also believe the American Revolution had a very significant impact on the history of the Jews here in New York. So that I also learned that this spot where we're standing was the site of the first synagogue in North America. And it was a very important in the consecration of the Mill Street Synagogue, which occurred 289 years ago today, on April 8th, was a very important event in Jewish history, American Jewish history, to put up a street sign here in Manhattan. So, ultimately, here we are. This is it was 289 years ago today that the Jewish community here in New York, which consisted probably, New York probably had about 10,000 people and perhaps 500 Jews, held one of the most important ceremonies in the 70 years they've been there, when they dedicated the first synagogue in North America right across the street. And that was with the backing and support of congregations throughout the world. I have to believe that was a very important day for the Jews here in New York. And I would say in the 300 years since then, it's been a very important day, and hopefully this will be a very important day too. So I'm going to turn this over to Ambrose Richardson, who's the vice president of our organization, and also has been 4 times, until recently, the past president of the Sons of the Revolution, who will run the rest of the program, and the various speakers will tell you more about it.
Thank you very much, Jim. This is a project which has been a germ of an idea that Jim had, that I'm happy to see it finally come together. We're celebrating here a small street sign on a very narrow street in Manhattan, but it's imbued with a lot of importance. You know, it's about history, it's about New York, it's about the extended Jewish community establishing roots in America. It's about religious tolerance and religious freedom, which is, of course, a foundation of the American Republic, and it's about the American Revolution. We have a blockbuster panel of speakers here, and let's get started with Rabbi Nissi Eber. Rabbi?
Sunday, March 12th, 2017, 200 years later, on 9 South William, down the block, otherwise known as the Wall Street Inn. It was a Sunday, and it was Purim. And we had a small group of people, 30 people, some children, and we were about to start reading the Megillah. And I said, before we start, I'd like to make an announcement. But I first asked the question, any of you are familiar with the historical importance of this block? And they all said no. I said, so I'd like to share something. I said, what we're about to do now is going to be an historical moment. For the simple reason that it's close to 200 years that the location that we stand in has not been used as a synagogue. 200 years. The Wall Street Inn, there's an alleyway, it's called Mill Lane, the shortest street in America. It used to be nicknamed Jews Alley because it was bordering the synagogue. And I said, right next door to Jews Alley, we're going to read the Megillah and bring back what was here 200 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, we're standing here today, 2 years later, and due to the hard work of many individuals spearheaded by Jim Kaplan and many others, we're standing here to acknowledge and to give the proper recognition that this block deserves in creating and playing such an important role in Jewish American history. As a rabbi in this neighborhood, and someone that does not live very far from here, but actually very close, it's amazing to see this street being codenamed Wall Street Synagogue Seixas Way. Now, for me, and I think for many here from the community, and I see many of you here that live all around here in the buildings, this is not just about celebrating the past, but this is also about celebrating the present and the future. Lower Manhattan has had several reincarnations. And what more appropriate place, at what more appropriate time, and what more appropriate way to celebrate Passover, freedom, redemption, renewal, than giving this block the proper recognition it deserves, being the block that hosted the first shul in North America. So today, I feel proud to say Lower Manhattan is back and the Jewish community is back on South William Street. God bless you all. God bless this wonderful country, and have a very happy Passover. Or a little Yiddish, Aziz and Pesach.
Our favorite council person from New York Council District Number 1, the Honorable Margaret Chin.
Everyone for being here today. It's a wonderful day for a wonderful celebration, and especially right before Passover that we're able to do this. So their contributions are largely overlooked. That fighting revolutionary spirit includes immigrants of the Jewish faith who constructed the Mill Street Synagogue near the spot. This congregation and one of its leaders, Gershom Mendes Seixas, would go on to play a pivotal role in the American Revolution. Under the leadership of Seixas, the congregation would become a supporter of the Patriots' cause and would leave New York for Pennsylvania rather than live under British rule. During the war, the congregants of the Mill Street Synagogue passionately defended both the revolutionary cause and the principle of religious liberty, speaking out against a religious test in Pennsylvania. After the war, Seixas would be one of the 14 clergymen to participate in President George Washington's first inauguration. Though historians have written about the importance of the Mill Street Synagogue for centuries, there has been no marker to commemorate this sacred place. Today, we finally recognize the role of this synagogue played in the history of the Jewish people in America, as well as the history of a nation that has never just been white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, but from the beginning has been a mixture of people of different races, religions, and national origin. So today, I am pleased to designate South William Street between Mill Lane and Broad Street as Mill Street Synagogue Seixas Way.
Margaret, our next speaker, we are honored to have the Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik of the Shearith Israel congregation, the first congregation in New York, which arrived here in 1654 and created this first synagogue. Rabbi Soloveitchik is a great student of history and, of course, the Jewish community here in New York.
Thank you very much. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress assembled a committee comprised of Franklin, Jefferson, and Adams, and tasked them with designing a seal for the United States of America. Two of the suggestions put forth by the committee drew from the biblical story of the Exodus. Franklin proposed an image of Moses and Pharaoh at the sea with the motto, "Rebellion to tyrants, obedience to God." Jefferson, in contrast, suggested an image of Israel in the desert, following God's cloud by day and his pillar of fire by night. Franklin, in other words, focused on the revolution, the overthrowing of England, rebellion to tyrants. Jefferson's suggested seal, in contrast, stressed a people remaining loyal to all that they believed, even when it was not easy. His image drawing on Jeremiah, "Thus saith the Lord, I remember the loyalty of your youth when you followed me into the wilderness." The man we celebrate today, Gershom Mendes Seixas, whose community we remember not long before the story of the Exodus is remembered by Jews all over the world, he and they embody both these images. Seixas was known as the patriot spiritual minister, patriot rabbi or patriot minister of the revolution, one who took part in that rebellion to tyrants. But he and his community, our community, She'erith Israel, born on this island in 1654, which built a synagogue right here in 1730, they also represent loyalty to all that they believed, loyalty to the faith of their fathers, loyalty to Judaism, loyalty to the scroll of the Torah that was read and studied in that synagogue, even when most of their fellow Jews lived thousands of miles away, but also as the founding fathers of American Judaism. An America of religious liberty today is part of their legacy, but we also take such pride in the fact that their community vibrantly continues today, a little bit uptown, where we pray the same prayers that they prayed. We follow the same traditions that they followed. We study the same scroll of the Torah and its eternal laws. We remember today the patriot Gershom Mendes Seixas and his flock, heroes in the history of America. But we also remember Gershom Mendes Seixas, spiritual leader of a synagogue that stood here, a community made up of faithful heroes in the history of Judaism itself.
Next, we are calling upon Cheryl Beer, who is the executive director of B'nai Zion Foundation, and she's also pitching for Joseph Potasnik of the New York Board of Rabbis.
I'm so grateful to be with you today to celebrate this historic renaming ceremony, a symbolic recognition of the vital impact that the Jewish people have had on this city and on New York State as a whole. The first group of Jewish settlers arrived in New York in September 1654, fleeing from Brazil after the Portuguese gained control of the area and brought the Inquisition along with them. In the years that followed, Jews from all over the world came to New York in search of religious freedom and opportunity, so much so that New York City is now the community with the largest numbers of Jews outside the state of Israel. We have found that freedom and that opportunity here, and in return, we have enriched nearly every aspect of the city and the state of New York.
Next, I'd like to call on Rabbi Ari Fritkus of the Temple of Universal Judaism, who has been an earlier supporter of this project and helped push it forward. Rabbi Fritkus.
I want you to either gently close your eyes or look inward right now and think about Minister Rabbi Seixas, perhaps standing here or across the street at his synagogue, draped in a talit, and maybe in the courtyard after services where they have a sukkah, maybe with a hat like George Washington. Because Rabbi Seixas and the Mill Street Synagogue stood for bringing people together. And when the British were coming, he said he thought it could be the last time he would preach at this synagogue. And first, as you said, he took the scrolls, as Jews have done so many times, to preserve the message of proclaiming liberty throughout the land, of being kind to the stranger, because that's the most repeated commandment in the Torah. To remember you were a stranger in Egypt and be kind to the stranger.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'd like next to call on another representative of one of our sponsors, the American Sephardi Society. This is David Dangor.
I wanted to make sure that I could tell you something that no one else covered. And I found myself having to go back to 586 BC. And I knew I'd be safe. This country is a miracle for the Jewish people. But it was started in 586 BC. What happened in 586? Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire conquered the Jewish homeland, took the Jews as prisoners to Babylon, and enslaved them. They turned out to be diligent, working hard, and contributing in Babylon. And when the great Persian emperor Cyrus the Great, 40 years later, conquered Babylon, the first thing he did was come out with the first proclamation known in history of freedom and freedom of religion. And with that proclamation, allowed the Jews to go back to their homeland. Now, why is that relevant to today? That proclamation exists today still in safekeeping at the British Museum in the form of a clay cylinder where it's all spelled out. And that clay cylinder is so famous that it's a fact that our founding fathers of this country were inspired by this cylinder and the diligence of the Jewish people when they came with the Declaration of Freedom in this country.
Don't forget about Alan Millman, who does everything for us. He's a Vice Commandant of the Veteran Corps of Artillery. He's a treasurer of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association and the guy who gets things done. He is here to give the first part of the introduction for the presentation of the award to Ambassador John Lowe.
It gives me great pleasure and I'm honored to join Peter Harn this afternoon to introduce my good friend, Ambassador John L. Loeb Jr. Ambassador John Loeb is being awarded the Lower Manhattan Historical Association Sons of the Revolution in the State of New York Religious Freedom Award for his devotion to fighting for religious freedom. Among his many and significant achievements, Ambassador Loeb served as chairman of the New York State Council of Environmental Advisors. He was United Nations delegate and was the United States ambassador to Denmark. He has since devoted a significant part of his life to fighting for religious freedom and against anti-Semitism. In 2009, he established the Loeb Visitor Center on the campus of Truro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, which celebrates its 10th anniversary this year. And now I'd like to invite Peter Hine, President of the Sons of the Revolution, to join me and add a few more thoughts of introduction and reward.
Sons of the Revolution in the state of New York is pleased to join with the Lower Manhattan Historical Association in presenting Ambassador Loeb with our Religious Freedom Award. Ambassador Loeb, as Alan has mentioned, has done much to foster the important cause of religious freedom, a cause that is important both to the history of our nation as well as into present times. Ambassador Loeb descends from Revolutionary War veteran Jacob Phillips. Ambassador Loeb, in addition to his memoirs, has authored and was the moving force behind a very well-researched book, An American Experience, Adeline Moses Loeb and Her Early American Jewish Ancestors. And as a fitting tribute to his grandmother, Ambassador Loeb established the Adeline Moses Loeb Gallery at Fraunces Tavern Museum. So, Ambassador Loeb, on behalf of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association and the Sons of the Revolution of the State of New York, it is our pleasure to award you this Religious Freedom Award.
I've been very fortunate to have relatives who have inspired my beliefs in religious freedom and freedom of speech, including the man we are celebrating today, Gershom Mendes Seixas. For decades, he's been known to me through my family history. Actually, it's Adeline Moses' family history. He was a fierce advocate of religious liberty, and particularly during the early days of the nation's founding. I would like to leave you with one thought, which I hope will continue to ponder long after today. When we talk about the First Amendment, how to protect it and champion it, how to educate especially young people about it, we often use the word tolerance. After a lifetime of doing what I could to further causes of religious freedom and battling anti-Semitism, I have found that we should strive for more than tolerance. We should strive to live with a genuine affection and warmth for people whose backgrounds are different from our own. This is a tall order, one which begins, as many good things do, with seeking understanding and educating ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, Alan Millman, Peter Hine, Lynn Kaplan, Ambrose, thank you again for this wonderful award.
For today, the patriot Gershom Mendes Seixas and his flock, heroes in the history of America. But we also remember Gershom Mendes Seixas, spiritual leader of a synagogue that stood here, a community made up of faithful heroes in the history of Judaism itself. I conclude now my remarks with the Hashkabah, the Sephardic memorial prayer for Gershom Mendes Seixas. Tov Shem Mishem Tov Yom HaMavet Miyom Hivalado Sof Davar Kol Nishma and Telemeret Tav Shimor Tizeh Kol Ha'adam Yalezu Chasidim Bechavod Yoranu HaMishklotam Menucha Nechona B'Shiva Elyona Tachat Kafei HaShechina Malad Kedoshim Mutarim Kezohar Rakia Merim Mazim B'chutz L'Machar Parashamim V'Rakat Pesha V'Akravat Yesha V'Chemra V'Chalom Shochem Menuna V'Chulaka Tava V'Chulaka Tava לעולם הבא, שבתם אנחנו חיצה וישתה בנפש השם הטוב. הגביר הנגלה, נעים זמרות ישראל, גרשם מנדס סיישס, רוח אדוני תניחנו בגן עדן, דיבר לנו ושמר ירה, המלך ברבקוס וחמול עליו ולאב השלום, ועל משכבו יהיה שלום, כתכתיב יבוא שלום, ינוחו משכל דרך הולך נכוחו, הוא וכל שופי עמו ישראל בכלל הרחמים והסליחות, וכן יהי רצון ונאמר אמן. Thank you very much.